with his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning. It's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
Law and order atmosphere. In the late 1960s, as the uprisings in the Watt section of Los Angeles, Newark, Detroit, and other cities occurred, right-wing political groups calling themselves Minutemen, actually you need to capitalize that, but we'll let that one slide, often appeared and engaged in their own violence in the name of law and order. Richard Nixon, as a presidential candidate and later as president, appealed to such groups with his law and order rhetoric and appealed to a silent majority that opposed both the tactics and beliefs of the militant social movements of the 1960s. I remember those times, and the silent majority were people who just didn't go along with pretty much liberal policies. It wasn't aimed at this kind of thing, but whatever the case, I still don't see a connection to Kyle. Beginning with the Nixon administration, the federal and state governments greatly increased the number of jails and prisons in the U.S. and the number of inmates in those prisons. So much so that analysts began to see a prison industrial complex coming into existence by the early 21st century. And none of the people that Kyle shot went to prison, and Kyle didn't go to prison. So what's the connection to Kyle? Who cares about the prison industrial complex? It's not important to understanding what took place in Kenosha. Fueled by Nixon's war on drugs, the three strikes laws of the 1990s, and the growing privatization of prisons, prison populations jumped by, and who cares? Damn it! Get to the point! Again, does it sound like he's writing a high school essay where the teacher says, I need 1,000 words, and guess what? You only have 400, and therefore you need to put another 600 words in there, so what do? We just diverge and start writing about crap that's not even relevant. That's what he's doing here, except that there was no minimum word count required. And he goes on, talks about crack cocaine. That's right. Crack cocaine is somehow relevant to Kyle Rittenhouse. Examples of police brutality also proliferated. The number of incidents was not necessarily greater than in the past, but the advances made by civil rights movement made it much more likely that police violence would be reported in the press and on television, and the Kenosha shootings did not feature any police brutality. In fact, everybody's complaining that the police didn't do anything. So what's the connection to Kyle Rittenhouse? We have buried deep into this, and we still haven't been told that. Oh no, now we're going to bring up Ronald Reagan. With Ronald Reagan's election to the presidency, oh man, screw this. Let's just skip down. Somewhere along the line, he has to make a connection between all this crap and Kyle. Sooner or later, he has to get to the point, right? You would think. With impunity, they established compounds. Oh, just like Kyle. Kyle had a compound at his mother's apartment. In selected areas of the countryside to train recruits in weapons use. I guess that's how Kyle learned to use his rifle, because he went to one of these compounds and they trained him, I guess. They were largely coddled and protected by conservative politicians until they committed heinous crimes, including armed robberies and assassinations. The right-wing terrorist attack on the Amira Federal Building in Oklahoma City in 1995 compelled the FBI and other police agencies to take such armed vigilante groups much more seriously. And the connection to Kyle, we're still waiting on it. Keep in mind how terrible this is. He's supposed to be a history professor, and he's made a claim really early on that Kyle's actions were somehow a violation of civil rights. And we have gone on and on and on, and he's not made that connection yet. All right. However, in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, the focus of the fight against terrorism shifted outward against alleged foreign terrorist organizations. Now we're going to bring the Muslims in. None of the people that Kyle shot were Islamic. This was enabled by the Patriot Act, which increased federal police power and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, a massive agency whose initial 2002 budget ballooned. Oh man, who cares about the budget for the Homeland Security Department? What's the relevance? Little was done to curb or even investigate the righteous militias, even as they openly spread their ideologies on social media. Now keep in mind here, these righteous militias are spreading their ideologies on social media, which is a First Amendment right, and he is saying that the government did not do enough to stop them. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is he's later going to complain about First Amendment violations. Donald Trump's presidency aided and abetted these groups as no national administration ever had. Trump treated these neo-fascist groups in the same way Southern segregationist governors had long treated the KKK. Oh, Lord. Repeatedly inciting through his demagoguery their violent acts and then issuing mild criticism of those acts. In 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, Klansmen and neo-Nazis marched to defend a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, which they can do, okay? The Unite the Right rally resulted in violent attacks against those protesting the march, including the murder of a young woman. Trump stated that there were fine people on both sides, in effect supporting the white supremacists. This man is supposed to be a history professor. He should have looked into the context of those statements. And if he had, and he had been honest, he would have realized that Trump was not saying that there were people amongst the white supremacist groups that were fine people. Trump also vilified and encouraged violence against protesters who opposed his call for mass arrests of undocumented workers and his stands on foreign policy and the environment. Well, you're making a claim here. Why not provide some examples to substantiate your claim? You're supposed to be a history professor. He has directed much of his animus toward the Black Lives Movement, claiming that they incite violence and symbolize hate. Militias aside, individuals motivated by racism and white supremacy continue to commit horrific acts. Okay, in 2015, a white supremacist murdered 9 African-American congregants at a church in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, fine, but what's the relationship between him and Kyle? And in 2019, a racist fueled by anti-immigrant hysteria murdered 22 people at a Walmart in El Paso. We know. We've heard all of these accounts. Notice that we haven't heard anything about Kyle since like the opening paragraph. Trump's crude identification of the police and the military as the solution to all problems provided support for these neo-fascist militias. I don't recall Trump ever making that claim. Again, wouldn't this be a great idea to quote the president? It's called justification, citation, substantiation. Previously, these groups had denounced government's power to do virtually anything, a sort of ultra-right anarchism where individual and group freedom was absolute regardless of the social consequences. Now they had a government with which they could identify, and they increasingly saw themselves as fighting with and for police and business forces threatened by social protests, much as they had through most of U.S. history. These groups played a significant role in the failed January 6 coup to restore Trump to power. Even with some of their leaders and members facing prosecution and imprisonment for their actions, they continue to play a role as they involve themselves in protests against vaccination mandates. Oh my God, we're now talking about vaccination. Attempts to reform the police restrictions on the use of fossil fuels, and other issues. None of this has any bearing on Kyle. All right, finally, we get to the specifics of the Rittenhouse case. In August 2020, Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old African American, was shot 7 times as he sought to drive away in his SUV with his children following a domestic abuse with his girlfriend. I thought we already talked about this. Is he going back over it again? Didn't I mention something about Jacob Blake already? Yeah, this is great writing from a historian. Way to go. Nice structure. Anybody can be, I guess, a history professor. And by the way, Jacob Blake was not shot as he sought to drive away. He didn't even really get very far into the car. The fact that he wasn't supposed to be taking the car has been kind of glided over here. All right, we move on. The May 2020 police murder of George Floyd had sparked protests throughout the world against racism and police brutality. Most of them peaceful, as well as counter-protests in support of police power by rightist and racist political groups. Most of the protests here and abroad were peaceful. They weren't in Kenosha. We know that for a fact. Nobody can claim that the protests in Kenosha were mostly peaceful. They burned half the damn town down. In the U.S., militia groups claiming to support the police and business owners traveled to the protests and often incited violence by brandishing their weapons. Notice how he complains about these other groups traveling to Kenosha, but he doesn't reserve any of the same animosity towards protesters who travel from abroad into Kenosha. And incited violence by brandishing their weapons? When? Where? When did that happen? These groups, intelligence analysts note, define themselves as peacekeepers and use the violence they help incite to gain publicity for themselves. I see no substantiation for this claim. He just says it. Mark German, a former FBI agent who worked undercover to expose neo-Nazi groups in the U.S., compared these groups to Hitler's stormtroopers. Oh, brother. Nazi thugs. Wait, thugs? I thought that was a racist term. Nazi thugs rallied where they knew they had political opposition. They could attack and get media coverage and gain a reputation for being tough and scary. Is he claiming that Kyle was doing this? Well, if so, say it, and then substantiate it. Of the peacekeepers, he added, you can't just nominate yourself as a security provider. Oh, yes, you can. Unless the law says you can't, you can. Every night when I go to bed, I nominate myself as a security provider. Home invaded. If I feel that a mob is going to destroy a friend of mine's house or business, I absolutely can nominate myself as a security provider. Before he came to Kenosha, Kyle Rittenhouse was part of a low-income family living a hand-to-mouth existence. That much is true. These conditions are closer to those of the people, black and white, and you notice that he capitalizes black, but he puts white in lowercase, who protested the shootings of Jacob Blake than they are to his right-wing supporters and their financial backers. So in other words, who I support should be based on who is closer to my economic situation. Is that a logical argument? I can't believe this dude has a PhD. Rittenhouse participated in police and fire department cadet programs. Oh my God. He wanted to be a fireman, hoping to eventually become a police officer. Oh, the bastard. He wanted to be a police officer. Ooh. He was not strong or tough, but he sought to identify with those who were. And he put not strong or tough in quotation marks. So this is a direct quote. If so, who made the statement and why are you not citing it? Remember, history professor. To become part of the hunters rather than the hunted in a society that marginalizes lower strata workers and the poor. So he's claiming here that Kyle set out to become part of the hunters. Where's the evidence for that? I don't see any evidence to support that. And I will guarantee you, everybody, that I have followed the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting far closer than this dude. I have seen every bit of footage of Kyle that night. I would like to know on what evidence he's making this claim that Kyle went out there to hunt people. He portrayed himself that way on social media and even sent pictures of his attendance at a Trump rally. So all of his evidence to support the claim that Kyle went out there to hunt people down was based on the fact that he went to a Trump rally. He says he portrayed himself that way on social media, but he doesn't show any screen captures of it, nor does he even describe it. So where is it? He doesn't have the screen captures. He doesn't have the content. Putting this in because that's what he heard on social media. Somebody told him on social media that Kyle portrayed himself that way, and he's just repeating it. If he has screen captures of the social media that Kyle put out that substantiates his claim, then why is he not posting it? He doesn't have it. You know it. I know it. And he knows it as well. As far as attending a Trump rally, I know a lot of people that went to Trump rallies. So what? That doesn't mean that they go out in their spare time hunting people down to kill them. But this history does not excuse what Rittenhouse would do. Well, what history? He's going back to the very top where he talks about Kyle coming from a low-income family living a hand-to-mouth existence and wanting to join the police and fire cadet programs. Okay. He got his sister's boyfriend to purchase an AR-15 assault rifle. Oh my God, that's terrible. He asked his friend to buy a rifle for him. A weapon that has repeatedly been used in mass shootings and is favored by militia groups. It's favored by nearly everybody. There are 20 million of them in this country. Almost everybody who goes out and buys a rifle ends up buying one of these semi-automatics. So this whole notion somehow that Kyle used an AR-15, it means something, is BS. Here we go. His mother drove him from his home in Illinois 20 miles to Kenosha, where he joined older peacekeepers with military backgrounds, strutted around with his rifle, and enjoyed himself, according to videos. Oh, really? Now let's put this to the test. It says here, his mother drove him from his home in Illinois 20 miles to Kenosha. And then it says, according to videos. You show me the video that has Kyle and his mom in the car driving to the protests. This was published in December 2021, after the trial was over, after everybody knew that Kyle's mom had nothing to do with Kyle being at the protests. His mother did not drive him anywhere. Not that night. Did not happen. His mother didn't even know Kyle was at the protest. His mother had nothing to do with Kyle being there. And yet this historian, a man with a PhD in history, goes on in here and tells a blatant lie. And then says that it's supported by video, which is absolutely absurd. Again, historian. He strutted around with his rifle. So what? I don't see any problem with that. And oh my God, this is the worst. He enjoyed himself. I think that's what it says in the statutes, that it's illegal to carry a gun around and enjoy yourself. Yeah, as you listen to this, think written by a historian. Then his fantasy turned real. Well, what was his fantasy? You never even told us that. He shot his rifle, so the rifle wouldn't be worth as much now because he put a bullet in it. right? He shot his rifle. I think what you meant to say that he fired his rifle. You fire a rifle, you shoot at a target, asshole. And in confusion and fear, he ran. So in fear, so you're backing his self-defense claim? Excellent. I don't think you meant to, but then again, you don't really know the law, do you? Okay. And in confusion and fear, he ran, shot, and killed 2 unarmed men and wounded another. Let's not pay any attention to the fact that one of the men tried to kill him with a skateboard and the other one had a gun and pointed it at him. Let's just gloss over that. And by the way, all you people out there who say that a skateboard is not a deadly weapon, I tell you what, why don't you stand in a street, in a park or wherever, and I'll walk up behind you and you're going to let me swipe that thing across the back of your skull. You want to try it? Because I will tell you this, if I hit you at the base of your neck with that thing, I'm going to kill you. And I know you know that I would, and that's why you would never, ever, ever let me do it. Yet you turn around and say, well, it's not a dangerous weapon. Okay, let's put it to the test. And no, I'm not threatening anybody, guys. Don't start that crap. I would never want to hurt somebody. This is a hypothetical, fictitious thought experiment. The police, rather than seeking to contain both the violent armed militiamen and violent armed protesters, welcomed the militia peacekeepers as friends. They thanked them at various points and gave them water. I only know of one instance of that. Oh, here we go. This is really good. They let Rittenhouse through as he tried to surrender to them and return home with his mother. So his mom is waiting out there by the protests, and and she's watching her text messages. Hey mom, I'm done shooting protesters. Can you come pick me up? Oh, okay, I'll be right there. And Kyle walks along and she pulls up in the car and opens the door for him. He gets in, and his mother and Kyle with their rifle, they're driving off back home. According to this guy, the historian from Rutgers University, that's what happened. This is beyond ignorant. This is stupid. Anybody could have looked at this thing with any kind of critical thinking skills and said, I don't think that's what happened. Oh boy. Amazing. How could anybody screw up a historical event so badly? His acquittal, while it is seen throughout the world as a disgrace to both human rights and the rule of law, is unsurprising. Oh, okay, we just have to accept your claim that his acquittal is seen that way throughout the world. The trial itself shocked onlookers while Judge Schroeder exposed his bias. Oh, here we go. Now we're talking about a historian here, everybody. He knows the facts. He's researched this. He says he threw out the gun charge before the trial began.
Hi, I'm the most local person in here.
Let's see here. Is that what happened? No. Judge Schroeder threw out the gun charge before the jury deliberated, but long after the trial had started. And in fact, there was a lot of talk about why Judge Schroeder was not taking action on the gun charge. And there was also a lot of talk as to why he did that right before the jury deliberated. And here he is saying that Judge Schroeder threw out the gun charge before the trial even began. And this is a historian. I know I keep repeating that, but you have to remember, this dude is teaching your kids in a U.S. history class. How accurate do you think that all the crap he's spewing out in these introductory history classes is? According to this, Judge Schroeder repeatedly insulted the prosecution. That's actually false. I thought that Judge Schroeder could have. I would have laid out all kinds of insults at Binger. Judge Schroeder did get on him, but I don't recall him insulting him other than to say that he did not believe it when Binger said that he acted in good faith. And he barred the prosecution from calling the dead and wounded victims, while allowing defense lawyers to call them looters and arsonists. And this is also false. It is true that he barred the prosecution from calling the dead and wounded victims, because they are not victims until a jury says so. Judge Schroeder has always ruled that way in his past trials. He was acting along with his long-standing practice. He doesn't mention that here. It is not true that he allowed the defense to call them looters and arsonists. He said they might be able to if they could prove them as looters and arsonists, which is also long-standing practice. Almost immediately when the trial began, various celebrities of the ultra-right began to rally to Rittenhouse's support and use him for their own purposes. Over $2 million was raised for his legal defense. T-shirts and other paraphernalia praising his actions were produced and distributed. This guy can't write. He starts off with the first sentence written in an active voice, then he follows it with two really bad passive voice constructions. He now enjoys celebrity status in the Republican right. Seeking the limelight since his acquittal, Rittenhouse has appeared on right-wing media like the website Blaze TV and Fox News. So what? His celebrity status may have lifted him and his family out of poverty, itself a commentary on justice, equality, and the rule of law in the United States today. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.